Support comes from the Rosa Parks Museum on Troy University's Montgomery campus. Located on the spot of Mrs. Parks' historic 1955 arrest and featuring exhibits that chronicle the history of the Montgomery bus boycott. More information at troy.edu/Rosa Parks.
From Troy Public Radio, Troy University, and the Wiregrass Archives in Dothan, Alabama, this is It Came from the Archives. I'm Greg Phillips. Each episode, we delve into the archives to bring you a topic, introduce you to someone new, or tell you a story about the Wiregrass region and the surrounding area. Our guide is Dr. Marty Olliff, Director of the Wiregrass Archives at Troy University. Today is an interesting episode because we are actually doing something of a follow-up to a previous episode that we've done, focusing on photos of a Dothan neighborhood from 1958. That was the previous episode that we did. This is kind of following up on that because that episode and that article on the Troy Today blog focused on a particular neighborhood in Dothan that was getting ready for an urban renewal project. Today, we're going to be talking about some further history related to Dothan, and this comes from a project involving a local videographer and a grant that was received by the Wiregrass Archives. So, Dr. Olliff, get us started with how this came about and how it ties into that previous episode.
Absolutely happy to do so. This is the Wiregrass Black History Project. That was the title of the grant that local videographer Mitt Kirkland and I wrote and sent off to the Society of American Archivists Foundation, who funded this at a moderately nice amount of money. This is a relatively easy grant to get. You do need to focus on underrepresented groups or underrepresented people or underrepresented institutions within the archival world, within the archival collections. Try to broaden archival collections outside of the most highly literate institutions and people, and expand into people who would not normally leave archival type records, and to try to capture their stories as well. With that said, Mitt Kirkland, who is a lifelong resident of Dothan, and I really want to give him a big shout out here because he's been doing this work for a long, long, long time. He has extensive connections in particularly the African American community as well as the white community in Dothan and in Southeast Alabama and Southwest Georgia and North Florida. He has a long-running concern, particularly since he's retired, with capturing local histories, particularly in the Black community, because this is the history that is fading, not with fading ink on fading paper, but with people whose memories are fading, people who are passing away. This history is in danger of being lost. And so he's trying to capture this. Mitt's been well recognized for all of his contributions to broadcasting and to the area. The Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce has honored him with its Small Business Person of the Year Award in 2014 and inducted him into the Dothan Business Hall of Fame in 2022. And this is just a little smidgen of everything that Mitt Kirkland has achieved in his career. He's worked at the national level. I think he's even worked somewhat internationally. But he's done a tremendous amount of work that you wouldn't necessarily know about. But what the Wiregrass Black History Project wanted to do, what we promised to do, was to interview 9 African American elders who were alive in that transition period between racial segregation in toto through the desegregation era into the modern era, which, you can argue how desegregated or how racially integrated it is, but certainly it is different than it was. And there's this entire transition through the civil rights era. We wanted to find out what life was like for them. And Mitt did me a very great favor. We had not decided, we had not pitched to the funder who we were going to talk to. We just said, we're going to do 9 interviews, and they're going to be between 20 minutes and an hour long. And the funder was happy with that. And he tapped into a community of people who grew up in the Southside neighborhood, also called Frogtown, which in 1958 became the target of slum clearance and urban renewal. In fact, if you look at the tax records for Houston County, that neighborhood, after it transformed into kind of an upper middle class neighborhood of owner-occupied homes, is still called the Dothan Urban Renewal Neighborhood, even now. And it was completed before 1965. So, the name is long-lasting. Anyway, as we talked about in the podcast in November of 2024, and as you can read, and it came from the Archives blog post published in July 2019, then that was a neighborhood of substandard housing. It was a predominant, overwhelmingly African-American neighborhood. 176 black families and 5 white families lived in this designated area along Alice Street, just south of Fortner Street in Dothan. And all of those people were pushed out of that neighborhood. The property was all bought by the city. Everything was razed. Everything was bulldozed down, including all of the streets, and there was a new configuration of streets. It was planned as a subdivision. So, planning from sewers to curbs on widened streets and to where the housing sat, and the exact mix of commercial area on the edge of the residential area, and like I said, the exact number of houses that would be in there.
A lot of people displaced in this process.
A lot of people displaced in this process, yeah. Some voluntarily, many only semi-voluntarily. But we spoke with 6 people and got their impressions and their memories. They were children when this whole process began. So we talked to Ms. Elmarie Gordon, who is very in tune with her memories and kind of a leader in this whole thing. She was the one that recruited a number of these people. Mitt got in touch with Ms. Gordon. Ms. Gordon got in touch with other people. And she's also one of the big supporters of this project. She advertises it for us by word of mouth. Anyway, we learned a lot of interesting stuff about these folks that went beyond the Southside neighborhood, went into how they lived their lives. Ms. Gordon talked about her father passing away, and that then her family had been living in Miami, and she'd grown up in Southwest Georgia, and they had moved to Miami. Her father died. Then they moved back to Dothan. They lived, I believe, with her grandparents on South Alice Street, and later they moved over to Mixon Alley. This was not uncommon. Lots of people lived on these little alleyways in between the larger streets in the residential area. Well, not so much on Mixon, because even though it was a block long, there were only 2 houses on it.
Oh, yeah. This was one of them.
This was one of them, Gordon. Yes. Yeah. She recalls her early school career. She began, and another person began this way too. She began at age 4.5, going to first grade, when she accompanied her sister to school because she needed tending. And Ms. Gordon needed tending, not the sister. So who tended her? Well, the school did. And she was very smart and did school well. So the school accepted her into first grade. She also, and I'm going to leave this for people who want to listen to the raw interview, where we'll tell you where it is in a minute. She also relates a lot of other things, a lot of other stories. She talks about recreation. All of these folks talked about how they played, what they did. But Ms. Gordon particularly related some hijinks that almost resulted in a house fire and had to do with her deciding that she wanted to have a play kitchen. And in the play kitchen, there must be some fire so you could cook. Well, her play kitchen was made out of cardboard and wood. And so you can't build a fire inside of something made out of cardboard and wood. And, well, I mean, you can build it, but it has some consequences.
It will quickly become a larger fire than you were anticipating.
Well, and what do kids do when things go awry? They become frightened. And she became frightened, and as she relates it, she gathered up that burning stove and ran under the house with it, because her house was up on piers, and so she could get up under the house. So she took this flaming container under her house that was made out of wood. And she says, looking back on it, it's one of those things that still makes her cringe. But luckily, the fire that she took under there wasn't very large and did not catch the house on fire. And she was able to stomp it out, and she didn't get caught. So
wow, hey, good. That's always impressive when you're that age and you can get away with something.
Yes, indeed. So what goes on with this Wiregrass Black History Project is that the Wiregrass Archives posts the raw video footage and transcript to our YouTube channel, the Wiregrass Archives YouTube channel. And Mitt has his own YouTube channel called the Wiregrass Black History Channel. So it's at Wiregrass Black History Channel on YouTube. And he takes these raw interviews and, like every other producer, he edits them and to make a point. As an archivist, I just want you to see the raw product. As a producer and editor, he wants you to see the edited product. And so he has Ms. Gordon talking about a variety of things. I can't remember if she's talking about that particular fiery incident or not, but she's talking about Southside on his YouTube channel, the Wiregrass Black History Channel. Another person that we had speaking with us is Ms. Delois Daniels Easley Lee. She talks about living with her grandmother next door to Ms. Gordon in Mixon Alley. They gardened, and as she remembers it, and this was the most interesting thing that she said as far as life in Southside went, was because everybody grew gardens, and they would exchange food back and forth. She thought of it as a bartered system, but barter implies a transaction that's very conscious. I will give you this, and you will give me that in return. But this was more of what the great English historian E.P. Thompson coined as the moral economy. You do for other people, and they will do for you, but it's not a one-on-one transaction, and it's not expected. But she talks about sharing food in this informal system. She describes the South Alice Street School, where all of these people attended for first through third grade on one side and fourth, fifth, and sixth grade on the other side. According to Ms. Lee, they had a curtain hung between the first through third grade and the fourth through sixth grade, one teacher on each side, and the school is just one big school, and not even a two-classroom school, just a one-classroom school that's been divided by a curtain, and that the teachers arranged the seating with the younger students in the first two rows of seats, the next grade in the second two rows, and the last grade in the third two rows. It was exactly the same on both sides. Then she she talks about a couple of other things that are very personal that I think are very interesting. She talks for quite a while about an organdy dress that her grandmother made for her for Easter. And the gist of the story is just simply that she had this beautiful organdy dress, and she was young. She may have been about 9 or 10 when her grandmother made her and her sisters these dresses to wear to church on Easter. And that she had, Ms. Lee had gotten kind of offended because she was sitting on a pew and she had her dress laid out. She had petticoats up under it, and it was all splayed out on either side of her. And her grandmother made her pull it all in so other people could sit on the pew with her. And so she got her nose bent out of joint about that, and she still chuckles about that. But then she told another much more serious story about a woman that she did not call this, but I think a lot of people might consider to be something of a conjure woman, an older woman in the black community in her neighborhood, who she was walking home from school one day, and this woman just shouted out to her that her baby brother was going to die. And that's pretty creepy, right? And it totally creeped her out. It really disturbed her. I mean, this happened many decades ago, and it still disturbs her quite a bit. I was impressed that she would be willing to share this story. And subsequently, her baby brother died.
Wow.
Which, that's not that unusual, particularly for the mid-50s. A lot of small children died of communicable diseases, of, genetic problems, all kinds of things. We save a lot more little babies now and toddler-age kids now than we did back then. So I thought that was a pretty moving experience, and she got kind of choked up.
I would imagine that's probably still a difficult memory for her.
It's obviously a very difficult memory for her. So it's a little, I wish we didn't have those memories that we captured, but I'm glad that because people have those memories, we can capture them. Then Robert Cookie Potter. Cookie's a nickname. Apparently he got that nickname because he liked cookies. And in a couple of instances, he was able to load up on cookies, kind of in a somewhat inappropriate way, but he didn't steal them. It was just he took way more than his share of cookies. And from that point on, people called him Cookie. And he described his house. And it may have been the most substandard house of the crew. He talked about being able at night to look up through the roof and see the stars, which means it was leaking,
right?
When it rained. He said you could look through the sides of the walls where the boards joined, and you could see outside. So probably the most substandard house of all of these folks. They all describe their houses, but his apparently was the worst off. He grew up on Southside, but he went on to play professional baseball in both the Negro Leagues, where he played on a few teams, including the Indianapolis Clowns, and in the minor leagues, and he played for the Cincinnati Reds. They actually called him to the majors, but it fell through. He didn't end up on the majors, but he was called, but didn't make the final cut of the team. He pitched against Satchel Paige, another Alabama guy.
Yes, and whose age was always in question, as I recall.
Always in question, but Satchel Paige pitched into his 50s and maybe into his 60s at a professional level, both in the Negro Leagues and in Major League Baseball. Mr. Potter describes a lot of his discussion was about recreation. It was describing how they played baseball. And come to find out a little bit later, talking to Curly Bruner, that on Thursdays, Dothan shut down. Thursday afternoon, Dothan shut down. And at least in the black community, everybody would go gather over at the Lincoln Community Center, which had a swimming pool and had gyms and indoor facilities and also had a big baseball field. And the kids would play a pickup game against the adults. And this was not about the kids winning and getting quote-unquote participation trophies. The adults wanted to win. And what both Cookie Potter and Curly Bruner say is that that's where they learned how to play baseball. Was these adults weren't fooling around. They were there to win, and they were going to beat those kids. And they did regularly, but the kids learned how to play serious baseball. Cookie Potter at one point said that he said to himself, one of us in this crew is going to go on to be a professional baseball player. And then he said, I didn't realize it was going to be me. So he talks a lot about his baseball career. He also talks a lot about, you know how us old folks are. We're always saying, well, back in my day, kids behave this way, and kids get off light this time. You know, it's these darn kids these days syndrome. Well, he does a lot of that in this, but you know, if you're just listening for recreation, it's like, well, this guy's, you know, he's just being an old guy. And but if you listen to it pretty carefully, you can understand that what they're talking about is a vastly different worldview, the place of children in the world of adults. And they're not necessarily nostalgic for that, but they're trying to make sense of the changes in the world. And it's not that the changes are senseless, it's that they have to process the changes. And how do you process changes? You talk about them. And he's been given this opportunity to, by golly, talk. And so he's processing those changes in real time. It's a pretty interesting thing.
Fascinating
to see.
That's a fascinating thing. And then you also interviewed a Miss Dorothy Taylor Muhammad.
Yes. One of the things about these 4 interviews is they happened one right after the other, and every one of these 4 people, were in the room at the same time. So they had gotten each other all cranked up, and they had you can even hear them kibitz to each other or fill in blanks when they're talking. For example, Ms. Gordon wasn't exactly sure of her house address, but Cookie Potter could supply that house address for her and does so off mic, so much so that I've had to really jack up the background sound to make it come through. Anyway, Ms. Taylor Muhammad, she spoke of going to school early with her sister, just like Elmarie Gordon did. So she began school at 5. She talked a lot about her sister had a heart problem, had a heart illness, and so she wasn't as physically active as the other children. So when they went from Southside Elementary School or South Alice Elementary School over to Montana Street School, they had to walk 1.5 miles to get there. Well, Ms. Taylor Muhammad's sister could not walk that far, so her dad got him a cab every day. So while all the other kids are walking to school in a big old gaggle, they're driving to school in a cab. And,
wow.
And boy, I'm sure that really set them apart. She talks a lot about what it was like to transition from being in the community of Southside, which every one of our interviewees talked about the feeling of community that they had, talked about breaking that community and having to reestablish it over in Lakeview, which she did, of course, but she never quite got completely divorced from that old community in Southside. And she was very happy, for example, when she could still see her Southside buddies when the churches moved and her Southside friends retained their membership in the church, and it had moved over to Lakeview, and so she would see them on Sundays.
And she was also part of a group interview that was done with the others, correct? Where we had all of them in the same...
What Mitt realized, and I thoroughly agreed with him, though I knew this would be just anarchy, and it turned out to be so, was that all four of these narrators fed off of each other. And they began, as they listened to each other, to have better recollections and to remember more and to have sharper recall and to warm up, you might say. So that by the time we finished doing all four of these interviews, plus about half an hour of these people talking together before we started the interviews, then they were raring to go. And Mitt decided we're just going to sit them down at a table and point a camera at them and ask questions and let them just roll with it. It's absolute charming chaos. And they're having a ball doing it. They're talking about things they did not talk about in their individual interviews. It's less about they themselves as individuals telling their story and about talking about the community story. And again, this idea of community in Southside was particularly important.
Thank you for taking us on this trip down memory lane in Dothan, so to speak. And for people that are out there that are interested in learning more, you can certainly find the written version of this on Troy Today, the blog, and you can find it at the Wiregrass Archives, both online, and you can talk to Dr. Olliff in person at the Dothan campus about some of these matters. And, of course, on the YouTube links that we talked about throughout, please check out this project. It's a very important one. It's one that is providing a living history while we can of some of these things that otherwise would be forgotten. So thank you to Dr. Olliff and everything you guys are doing at the archives.
Well, thank you, Greg. And let me give you these URLs once again. The Wiregrass Black History Project has a website dedicated to it. It is at spectrum.troy.edu/WBHP for Wiregrass Black History Project. And the Wiregrass Black History Channel is on YouTube at youtube.com/@Wiregrass Black History Channel.
So we've reached the end of this episode, but definitely not the end of the Wiregrass Archives. There is still so much to discover and so many more stories to be told on this podcast. You can find more information on your own at troy.edu/Wiregrass Archives. If you like this podcast, be sure to tell a friend. And we'd love it if you left a review in the App Store. It helps other people find the show. I'm Greg Phillips, joined as always by Marty Olliff, director of the Wiregrass Archives in Dothan, Alabama. This episode was recorded in the studios of Troy Public Radio and was produced by Austin Toy and Joey Hudson with help from Kyle Gassett. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We'll be back again soon to tell you another story, and you'll know it came from the archives.